I'm Olivia Mitchell, 32, and I never thought my mother's Thanksgiving toast would destroy our family forever. Let's toast to secrets, she said, her eyes locked on my father and how they always find a way home. The champagne in her glass trembled as she spoke, and I watched my father's face drain of color. That night changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and the true meaning of family. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into this absolute roller coaster of a family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If this kind of family revenge drama speaks to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Trust me, what happens next will make you question everything about blood ties and loyalty. Now, let's continue with how my seemingly perfect family life crumbled before my eyes. For as long as I could remember, the Mitchell family had been the envy of our suburban Philadelphia neighborhood. My father, Richard, was a successful cardiothoracic surgeon at Penn Medicine, respected by colleagues and adored by patients. He had a confident demeanor that commanded any room he entered, with salt and pepper hair that only enhanced his distinguished appearance. My mother, Eleanor, was equally impressive, a former corporate lawyer who had gracefully transitioned to running her own interior design business after I was born. She balanced sophistication with warmth, and her dinner parties were legendary in our social circle. Then there was me, their only child, who had followed a path that made them both proud. After graduating from Wharton with honors, I'd built a thriving career in finance. I was newly engaged to Jackson, another finance executive whose family had connections that even my status-conscious parents approved of. The 3-carat diamond on my finger caught the light as I helped my mother prepare for what would be our last normal Thanksgiving. "Everything has to be perfect this year," my mother said, arranging her signature autumn centerpiece with meticulous care. "Your Aunt Catherine and Uncle Robert are coming all the way from Seattle, and it's been ages since we've had the whole family together." I nodded, noticing how my mother's hands trembled slightly. "Are you feeling all right, Mom? You seem tense." "Just tired, sweetheart. Planning the perfect Thanksgiving is exhausting, especially with 16 people coming." She brushed off my concern with practiced ease, something I'd seen her do countless times. What I didn't realize then was that my mother had been discovering things, terrible things, about my father over the past 3 months. Small clues that began with a text message notification she glimpsed on his phone while he was in the shower. A message from someone named Valerie with a heart emoji beside it. My mother had said nothing, choosing instead to watch and gather evidence. The night before Thanksgiving, while I was helping prep the vegetables, my mother's best friend Caroline called. Mom took the call in her study, but I could hear raised voices. When she emerged 30 minutes later, her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. "Is everything okay with Caroline?" I asked. "Everything is finally becoming clear," she replied cryptically. "Olivia, do you remember what I always taught you about respect? That it has to be earned," I recited, confused by her sudden intensity. "Exactly." She squeezed my hand. "And sometimes, when someone betrays that respect, there are consequences." I dismissed it as pre-holiday stress, unaware that my mother had just received the final confirmation she needed from Caroline, who had seen my father with another woman multiple times at a restaurant across town. Caroline had finally gathered the courage to tell my mother everything, including the devastating detail that this affair had been going on for over 15 years. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold. My fiancé arrived early to help with preparations, charming my mother as he always did while my father welcomed the first guests. Uncles, aunts, and cousins filled our home with laughter and conversation. Everything seemed perfect: the gleaming silverware, the delicious aromas from the kitchen, the warm glow of family togetherness. But I noticed my mother watching my father with an unsettling intensity. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. And when my father's phone chimed with a message during appetizers, she stiffened momentarily before resuming her perfect hostess demeanor. What I didn't know was that she had already seen the message, a Thanksgiving wish from his longtime mistress, because she had secretly gained access to his phone the previous night. As dinner approached its end, my mother rose gracefully to propose a toast, crystal glass in hand. Everyone quieted expectantly, unaware that this moment would shatter our family's foundation forever. The perfect Mitchell family image was about to be revealed for what it truly was, an elaborate facade hiding betrayal, lies, and soon, revenge so complete it would leave no one unscathed. "Let's toast to secrets," my mother said, her voice carrying across our dining room with unusual clarity, and how they always find a way home. The champagne in her glass caught the light from our chandelier as 16 faces turned toward her, expressions ranging from confused to curious. My father's face, however, had gone completely rigid. For a man who had performed life-saving surgeries under immense pressure, he suddenly looked like he might collapse. Something in his eyes, a flash of recognition and fear, made my stomach drop. "Eleanor," he said quietly, a warning in his tone. My mother smiled, a smile I had never seen before, cold and sharp as the carving knife beside the turkey. "No, Richard. I think I'd like to finish my toast." She took a measured sip from her glass, then continued. "Specifically, I'd like to toast to your secret, which has finally found its way home after 15 years. A collective inhale seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. My Aunt Catherine gasped, covering her mouth with her napkin. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, looking between my parents with growing alarm. Jackson squeezed my hand under the table, sensing disaster approaching. "I'm talking about Valerie," my mother replied calmly. "Valerie Chin. Your father's longtime mistress and, as I've recently discovered, the mother of his 13-year-old son." The crystal glass in my hand slipped, splashing red wine across the pristine white tablecloth, a spreading crimson stain that perfectly mirrored how I felt watching my family bleed out before my eyes. "That's enough," my father growled, standing abruptly. "Oh, I'm just getting started," my mother continued, removing a manila folder from beneath her seat cushion and placing it on the table. "I have the phone records, the hotel receipts, the bank statements showing money transfers to a separate account. 15 years of evidence that I've gathered over the past 3 months." My cousin Emma whispered something to her husband. My Uncle Robert stared intently at his plate. No one knew where to look or what to say as my mother methodically dismantled my father's double life in front of our entire family. "I'd especially like to toast to last year," my mother said, her voice growing icier with each word, "when you claimed to be at a medical conference in Chicago, but were actually in Turks and Caicos with Valerie and your son, Daniel. Our credit card statements were quite illuminating." My father remained standing, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "This isn't the time or place, Eleanor. When would be a good time, Richard? Another 15 years from now? Or perhaps after I've wasted my entire life loving a man who's been living a complete second life?" She turned to face our stunned relatives. "I apologize for the dramatic Thanksgiving entertainment, but I thought everyone should know exactly who they're breaking bread with today." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning as I tried to process this information. My father, the man I had idolized my entire life, who had taught me about integrity and honesty, had another family. A son only 13 years younger than me. "Is it true?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely audible. For the first time, my father looked directly at me, and the shame in his eyes confirmed everything before he could speak a word. "Olivia, I never meant for this to happen," he began, but my mother cut him off. "Oh, please enlighten us on how accidentally maintaining 2 separate families for 15 years happens, Richard. I'm fascinated to hear this explanation." What followed was the most excruciating 20 minutes of my life. As our turkey grew cold and our guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, my father admitted to his years-long affair with Valerie, a pharmaceutical representative he had met at a conference. He confirmed the existence of their son, Daniel. He attempted weak justifications about feeling trapped, about loving both families in different ways, about how he had planned to end things with Valerie many times but couldn't bear to hurt his son. Each word was another nail in the coffin of my childhood memories. Every fishing trip, every medical conference, every late night at the hospital now cast into doubt. Had he been with us or with them? The foundation of my identity, proud daughter of Richard and Eleanor Mitchell, was crumbling beneath my feet. And then my mother delivered the final blow. "I've filed for divorce," she announced, removing her wedding ring and placing it beside her plate with a soft clink. "The papers were served to your office this morning, Richard. I've also contacted the hospital board about the money you've been diverting from our joint accounts to support your second family. Oh, and Valerie's husband Greg has also been informed. Apparently, he's been in the dark about his son's true paternity all these years." My father's face drained of all remaining color. "You what?" "Greg deserved to know, just as I deserved to know. Just as Olivia deserved to know that the father she idolized is a fraud," my mother replied with terrifying composure. "Now, I believe it's time for you to leave. Pack what you need for tonight, but I expect you gone by tomorrow morning. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest." As my father stumbled from the dining room, leaving a wake of shocked silence behind him, I realized this was only the beginning of the devastation. What I couldn't possibly have known was how deeply this revelation would alter the course of not just my parents' lives, but mine and so many others connected to our family. The secrets were home, and they had arrived with the destructive force of a hurricane. The days following that catastrophic Thanksgiving unfolded like a surreal nightmare. Our guests had departed hastily after my father retreated upstairs, murmuring awkward condolences and avoiding eye contact. Jackson had stayed, holding my hand as I sat in stunned silence in our living room long after everyone else had gone. "Do you want me to stay the night?" he had asked gently. "I don't think you should be alone." But my mother had interjected, her voice strained but determined. "I think Olivia and I need some time alone tonight. Family time." The irony of her words, family time, when our family had just imploded, wasn't lost on me. After Jackson reluctantly left, promising to call in the morning, I confronted my mother. "How long have you known?" I demanded, the shock finally giving way to anger. "Why didn't you tell me before humiliating Dad and us in front of everyone?" My mother's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. She sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking older than her 58 years. "I only had suspicions until 3 months ago. Then I found concrete evidence when I saw a text on his phone. I've been gathering proof ever since." Her hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass. "As for why I did it this way, I wanted him to feel the same public shame I felt when Caroline told me she'd seen them together multiple times and everyone in her circle knew. 15 years, Olivia. He's been lying to us for 15 years. That night, I slept fitfully in my childhood bedroom while my father packed in silence down the hall. By morning, he was gone, leaving only a handwritten note addressed to me on the kitchen counter. "Olivia, there's no excuse for what I've done. I never meant to hurt you or your mother. I made a terrible mistake years ago, and instead of facing it, I kept building on lies until I was trapped in a life I couldn't reconcile with the man I wanted to be, the father you deserved. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to let me explain in person. Until then, know that I love you and always will, regardless of whether I've lost the right to call myself your father. Dad." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, only to retrieve it later and flatten it out, folding it carefully and tucking it into my wallet. Despite everything, I couldn't simply erase him. The next weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, hushed phone calls, and friends awkwardly attempting to console us without directly addressing what had happened. My mother channeled her pain into action, working methodically with her divorce attorney to dismantle the life she had built with my father. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on financial analyses when my own life had become a case study in catastrophic failure. Jackson was supportive, but increasingly frustrated by my emotional withdrawal. I'm trying to be here for you, he said one evening after I'd declined dinner with his parents. But you have to let me in sometime. I just found out my entire family history is a lie, I snapped. Excuse me if I'm not ready for small talk over beef Wellington with the Prestons. The real turning point came 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, when I was sorting through old family photos at my mother's request. She wanted anything with my father removed from the house. In a storage box in the attic, I found an envelope labeled Hospital Fundraiser 2012. Inside were photographs from a charity gala my parents had hosted. In one image, my father stood smiling beside a striking Asian American woman in a blue gown, their bodies angled slightly toward each other with the unconscious familiarity of people who knew each other well. With trembling hands, I turned the photo over. Someone had written, "Richard with Valerie Chin, Development Committee." My father's mistress had been right in front of us, even photographed in our home. Something inside me snapped. If my mother could take decisive action, so could I. I searched Valerie Chin Philadelphia Pharmaceutical online and within minutes had found her LinkedIn profile. From there, it was easy to find her Facebook page, which despite privacy settings, showed a profile picture of her with a young teenage boy who had unmistakable features that mirrored my own, the same Mitchell nose and chin that I had inherited from my father. My half-brother, Daniel. Without fully contemplating the consequences, I sent Valerie a message. I know who you are, and I know about Daniel. I'm Richard's daughter, and I think it's time we talked. Her response came within hours. Olivia, I've wanted to meet you for years. Richard always prevented it. I'm so sorry for everything. Yes, let's talk. The following day, I sat in a quiet cafe 10 miles from my neighborhood, anxiously watching the door. When Valerie entered, I recognized her immediately from the photo. She was elegant and composed, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd been sleeping as poorly as I had. She was alone. Daniel wasn't with her. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I almost didn't, I admit it. But I need answers that I don't think my father will ever give me honestly. Over the next 2 hours, Valerie revealed a story that both paralleled and diverged from what I had always believed about my father. She had met him at a medical conference in 2008 when she was newly married to Greg. Their affair began shortly after and resulted in her pregnancy with Daniel. My father had initially suggested termination, then stepped up to support them both when she refused. Greg had been told he was infertile due to childhood mumps, she explained, twisting her napkin between her fingers. He was overjoyed when I got pregnant, believing it was some kind of miracle. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. So my father has been part of Daniel's life all along? I asked. As Uncle Richard, yes. A close family friend who took a special interest in Daniel. He comes to school events, sports games. He's never missed a birthday. Her eyes filled with tears. I've lived with this deception for so long, convincing myself it was better for everyone. When your mother confronted me last week. My mother confronted you. This was news to me. Valerie nodded. She came to my office. Very calm, very dignified. She showed me all the evidence she'd gathered and told me she'd already informed my husband. She said I had 24 hours to tell Daniel the truth before she would do it herself. I felt a rush of both pride and horror at my mother's calculated approach. And did you? Tell Daniel. Yes. It was the hardest conversation of my life. Valerie wiped away a tear. Greg left us immediately. He's staying with his brother until he figures things out. And Daniel. Daniel is devastated, confused. He idolized both his dad, Greg, and his uncle Richard. Now he feels betrayed by everyone. The parallels to my own situation weren't lost on me. I know exactly how he feels, I said quietly. As our conversation concluded, Valerie hesitantly asked, Would you want to meet Daniel sometime? He asked about you. He's always wanted a sibling. The question caught me off guard. Did I want to meet this boy who was both a victim of our father's deception and a living symbol of his betrayal? Before I could formulate a response, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. "Where are you? Jackson is here, looking for you. Says you've missed lunch with his parents." Reality came crashing back. I had completely forgotten about the lunch with my future in-laws, another family now tangentially affected by my father's actions. As I hurriedly made excuses to Valerie and gathered my things to leave, I had no idea that this meeting was setting in motion a chain of events that would further unravel not just my family, but multiple families connected to ours. The true depth of my father's deception had only begun to reveal itself. By the time January arrived, what had begun as a family crisis had expanded into something far more complex. My engagement to Jackson was strained to breaking point. After meeting Valerie, I'd returned home to find him waiting with my mother, his expression a mixture of concern and annoyance. "You missed lunch with my parents," he'd said. "They flew in specifically to see us." "I'm sorry," I replied mechanically, unable to explain where I'd been without revealing my secret meeting. Something came up. My mother had watched this exchange with narrowed eyes, saying nothing until Jackson left with a terse goodbye. "Where were you really?" she demanded once we were alone. When I told her about meeting Valerie, her face hardened. "You had no right to do that without telling me. This isn't just your trauma to navigate, Olivia. And you had no right to confront her at her workplace or threaten to expose her son." I countered, my voice rising. "Daniel is an innocent child in all this. There are no innocent parties here except you and that boy," my mother shot back. "And I was protecting you, which is more than I can say for your father or his mistress." The argument escalated until we were both shouting, something that had never happened between us before. When she finally stormed out of the room, I realized with dismay that my father's betrayal was now creating new fractures in the relationships that remained. 2 days later, I received an email from a woman named Rebecca Winters. The subject line read simply, "I think we should talk about Richard Mitchell." My first thought was that this was another mistress coming forward. With shaking hands, I opened the email to find something even more disturbing. "Olivia, you don't know me, but I've known your father for many years through the hospital. I understand your family is going through a difficult time right now. The rumors about Dr. Mitchell's situation have spread throughout the medical community. I'm reaching out because I believe you deserve to know that Valerie Chin is not the only woman your father has been involved with over the years. I worked as a nurse in the cardiology department from 2010 to 2014, and I personally witnessed inappropriate relationships between Dr. Mitchell and at least 2 residents during that time. One young doctor confided in me that she felt pressured to reciprocate his attention to advance her career. I left Penn Medicine in 2014 after filing a formal complaint about the toxic environment in the department, which included Dr. Mitchell's behavior. As far as I know, the complaint was buried. Your father's reputation and surgical skills were too valuable to the hospital. I'm sorry to add to your pain, but I felt you should know the full truth. If you wish to discuss this further, my contact information is below. Rebecca Winters, RN. I sat staring at my screen, nausea rising in my throat. It wasn't just Valerie and Daniel. My father's betrayals were more numerous, more callous than I had imagined. He hadn't simply fallen in love with another woman and created a second family. He had abused his position of power at the hospital to pursue multiple women. When I forwarded the email to my mother, her response was immediate. "Contact her. We need to know everything." I met Rebecca at a restaurant far from our usual haunts, where there was little chance of running into anyone from my parents' social circle. She was in her early 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "I debated for weeks whether to contact you," she admitted. "But when I heard through colleagues about what happened at Thanksgiving, and then that your mother was pursuing a divorce, I felt you both deserved the complete picture." What she revealed over lunch was worse than I had feared. My father had engaged in numerous inappropriate relationships with female residents and even patients, using his status and charm to manipulate them. The hospital administration had received multiple complaints, but had consistently protected him due to his reputation as one of their top surgeons. The final straw for me was when Emily Jacobs, a brilliant first-year resident, quit the program after your father's unwanted advances, Rebecca explained. When she threatened to file a formal complaint, she was reminded of the non-disparagement clause in her contract. Last I heard, she'd left medicine entirely. I felt physically ill. Do you have contact information for any of these women? Rebecca hesitated. Emily might be willing to talk to you. She was the only one brave enough to push back against the system, even though it cost her career. Later that evening, I sat with my mother in her study, processing this new information. I want to go public, she declared, pacing the room with renewed energy. Not just with the affairs, but with the hospital's complicity in covering up his behavior. They enabled him for years, protecting their star surgeon at the expense of vulnerable women. What about Daniel? I asked. If this becomes a public scandal, it will affect him too. And what about me? My career, my relationship with Jackson. Your relationship? My mother stopped pacing. Are you seriously worried about your engagement when women's careers have been destroyed by your father? Her dismissal of my concerns stung. This affects all of us in different ways, Mom. I'm trying to figure out how to move forward with my life, while everything I thought I knew keeps shifting under my feet. The argument that followed was even more heated than our previous one. My mother was determined to see my father face consequences for all his actions, while I was torn between desire for justice and fear of further destruction. We were still shouting when the doorbell rang. My mother answered it to find Jackson standing on our doorstep, his expression grim. I need to speak with Olivia, he said. Privately. We walked to the garden, where the winter air matched the chill between us. Jackson took a deep breath before speaking. I've been patient, Olivia. I've tried to give you space to deal with your family situation. But you've been distant, canceling plans, keeping secrets. Whatever's happening, you're shutting me out completely. That's not fair, I protested. My entire life has imploded. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. And I've been trying to be your lifeline, he countered. But you won't take my hand. I called your office today to have lunch delivered as a surprise. They told me you've extended your leave of absence through February. You didn't even tell me. The hurt in his eyes made me realize how much my withdrawal had affected him. But before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Daniel. Valerie gave me your number. Can we meet? Jackson caught the look on my face. Another secret, he asked quietly. My half-brother wants to meet me, I whispered, showing him the text. His expression softened momentarily, then hardened again. You have a half-brother you never told me about? What else aren't you telling me, Olivia? The conversation deteriorated from there. By the time Jackson left, my 3-carat engagement ring was sitting on the garden bench between us, and the future I had planned with him had evaporated like morning mist. I sat alone in the cold until my fingers were numb, staring at Daniel's text. Finally, I replied, yes, let's meet. When and where? Hey everyone, I can feel your tension through the screen right now. This family drama is just getting started, and I know many of you are wondering what happens when I finally meet my half-brother Daniel. Before we continue this emotional roller coaster, take a quick second to hit that like button if you've ever had to rebuild trust after a family betrayal. Subscribe if you want to see more real-life stories about family secrets and their consequences. I'm going to take a deep breath before diving into what happened next, because trust me, meeting Daniel was just the beginning of uncovering the truth. The cafe where I agreed to meet Daniel was a quiet spot near his school, chosen specifically because it was unlikely to be frequented by anyone from either of our social circles. I arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a corner table and ordering a chai latte that I was too nervous to drink. When the door chimed and a lanky teenager with dark hair entered, scanning the room anxiously, I knew immediately it was him. Daniel had my father's eyes and jawline, combined with Valerie's delicate features and coloring. The resemblance to both my father and myself was undeniable, a walking, breathing reminder of my father's duplicity. He spotted me and approached hesitantly, clutching the strap of his backpack like a lifeline. "Olivia?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes," I replied, standing awkwardly. "It's nice to meet you, Daniel." He slid into the seat across from me, fiddling with a napkin. "This is weird, right? Like, super weird." His directness broke the tension, and I found myself smiling despite everything. Definitely super weird. For the next hour, we navigated a careful conversation, two strangers connected by blood and betrayal, trying to make sense of our new reality. Daniel was articulate and thoughtful, with flashes of sarcastic humor that reminded me painfully of my father. "Mom says you work in finance," he said, stirring his hot chocolate. "Dad, I mean Richard, always talked about how smart you were. He has your Wharton graduation photo in his wallet." The revelation that my father carried my photo alongside his secret second life was a fresh wound. "He talks about me all the time," Daniel confirmed. "He'd bring you up whenever I did well in school. 'You're just like Olivia,' he'd say. 'I used to think you were his niece or something.'" Each new detail was another piece of the impossible puzzle of my father's compartmentalized life. How had he maintained this elaborate deception for so long? The mental gymnastics required were staggering. "Do you hate him?" Daniel asked bluntly. "Because I think I do, sometimes. And then I feel guilty because he's always been there for me. Just not as, my actual dad. I don't know what I feel anymore," I admitted. "Mostly I'm angry that everything I thought I knew about our family was a lie." Daniel nodded, understanding beyond his years. "Greg, the guy I thought was my dad, he's filing for divorce. He won't even talk to me now. Says he needs space." His eyes welled up. Like it's my fault somehow. I reached across the table impulsively, squeezing his hand. "None of this is your fault, Daniel. Or mine. We didn't ask to be put in this situation." Our conversation deepened as we shared more about our lives and discovered surprising parallels. We both played piano, loved the same obscure sci-fi novels, and had the same irrational fear of butterflies. By the time we parted, exchanging phone numbers and making tentative plans to meet again, I felt a connection to this boy that transcended the circumstances of our meeting. On the drive home, however, reality crashed back. My mother had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails. When I finally called her back, her voice was tight with controlled fury. "The hospital board called. Your father has resigned for personal reasons, and they're offering him a generous severance package. They're burying everything, Olivia. All those women, all those complaints, they're protecting him again." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What are you going to do?" "I've contacted a reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Emily Jacobs, that resident Rebecca mentioned, has agreed to speak on record. 2 others are considering it. We're going to expose everything." "Mom, wait." "No, Olivia. I'm done waiting. Richard doesn't get to walk away unscathed after what he's done. Not this time." The line went dead before I could argue further. I pulled over, my hands shaking too much to drive safely. My mother was about to unleash a public scandal that would destroy my father professionally and personally, which he perhaps deserved, but would also cause collateral damage to everyone connected to him, including Daniel. I called my father for the first time since Thanksgiving. "Olivia?" His voice was a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. "I didn't think you'd ever call." "Mom's going to the press," I said without preamble. "About everything, Valerie, Daniel, and the women at the hospital." "The Inquirer, Dad. Emily Jacobs is talking." The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I see. Is that all you have to say?" "I see." My anger surged unexpectedly. "Do you have any idea what you've done to us? To Mom, to me? To Daniel and Valerie? To those women whose careers you destroyed?" "Olivia, please. No. You don't get to ask for anything. I just thought you should know what's coming. For Daniel's sake, not yours." I hung up, immediately feeling both vindicated and terrible. Despite everything, he was still my father, The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night helping me with college applications, who had cried at my graduation. The next day, I met Emily Jacobs at her apartment in a neighboring town, where she'd begun a new career in healthcare consulting. She was in her early 30s, with an intensity that suggested the brilliant doctor she might have become. "I almost didn't agree to this meeting," she said, offering me coffee. "I've spent years trying to put that part of my life behind me. But when Rebecca called and explained your situation," she shrugged. "I figured I owed it to you. To all of us." Emily's account of my father's behavior was devastating. What had begun as mentorship had gradually evolved into unwanted attention, inappropriate comments, and eventually, an ultimatum delivered during a late-night surgery. Reciprocate his interest or forget about the recommendation letter essential for her fellowship applications. When I refused and reported him, the administration suggested I was misinterpreting his old-school mentoring style, she recalled bitterly. They offered to transfer me to another department, dermatology of all things, when I'd been training for cardiothoracic surgery for years. When I pushed back, they reminded me about the non-disparagement clause in my contract and how difficult it would be to match with another residency program if I left under a cloud. I sat in horrified silence as she continued, describing how my father had systematically targeted vulnerable female residents and how the hospital had consistently protected him. It wasn't just about affairs, it was about power, manipulation, and institutional betrayal. "I'm so sorry," I finally managed, inadequate words for the harm my father had caused. Emily studied me for a moment. "You know, you look like him. But you're not him, Olivia. You didn't do this." But I benefited from it, I realized aloud. My whole life, private schools, Wharton, my career connections, all of it came from his success at the hospital. Success that was protected and preserved at the expense of women like you. The weight of this complicity, however unwitting, settled on my shoulders. As I left Emily's apartment, I knew with certainty that my mother was right. My father needed to face consequences, regardless of the fallout for our family. Some forms of justice couldn't be negotiated or compromised. But I also knew that Daniel deserved protection from the coming storm. That night, I called Valerie and warned her about the newspaper investigation, suggesting she find a way to prepare Daniel for the public exposure of our family's secrets. What I didn't anticipate was my father's response to the approaching reckoning. The next morning, he called my mother directly for the first time since Thanksgiving. My mother summoned me to her home with an urgent text, "Your father called. We need to talk now." When I arrived, she was pacing the living room, her face flushed with anger. "He's threatening to countersue for defamation if we go to the press. Says he has evidence that would damage my reputation as well." "What evidence?" I asked, mystified. My mother's life had been beyond reproach, dedicated to her career, her family, her community. She sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking defeated. "Before I met your father, I had a situation. A senior partner at my law firm pressured me into a relationship. When I tried to end it, he threatened my career." Her eyes met mine. I was young and scared, so I recorded our conversations as insurance. When I played those recordings for the firm's management, they offered me a settlement with a confidentiality agreement. Understanding dawned. "And Dad knows about this." "I told him early in our marriage," she confirmed. "The recordings and settlement documents are in our safe deposit box. He's threatening to expose that I violated the confidentiality agreement if I go public with his affairs." The irony was staggering, my father using my mother's own experience with workplace harassment as leverage against her exposing his similar behavior. "That's despicable," I said. "But Mom, if you experienced something similar to what Emily did, doesn't that make exposing Dad even more important?" She shook her head. "It's not that simple. The confidentiality agreement had severe financial penalties. I used that settlement money to start my design business. If they came after me now, I could lose everything." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in my mother's eyes. Her revenge plan had hit an unexpected obstacle, and the power dynamic had shifted. Later that day, I received a text from Daniel. Richard just showed up at our house. He and Mom are having a major fight. Can we talk? I met him at a park near his home, where he huddled miserably on a bench in the winter cold. He says there's going to be a newspaper story about him, Daniel said, his breath visible in the frosty air. About us. About everything. He wants Mom to move us to Chicago to avoid the publicity. What did she say? She told him to get out and never come back. Daniel kicked at a frozen puddle. She said she's done protecting him and lying for him. Then they started screaming at each other about someone named Emily and some hospital thing. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What's happening, Olivia? Is our whole life about to be in the newspaper for everyone to see? I sat beside him, struggling with how much to share. There's more to the story than just Dad's relationship with your mom. He did some bad things at work too, things that hurt people's careers. Those people want the truth to come out. So everyone at school will know? About me being, not really Greg's son? About Richard being my actual father. His voice cracked. I already lost one dad. Now I'm going to be a freak show too. The anguish in his voice crystallized something for me. Adults in this situation, my parents, Valerie, the hospital administrators, had all made choices. Daniel and I had not. Yet we would bear the consequences of their actions regardless. That evening, I did something I'd never thought possible. I invited Valerie and Daniel to meet with my mother at her home. The atmosphere was tense as we gathered in the living room, these two women who had unwittingly shared a husband for 15 years. Thank you for agreeing to this, I began awkwardly. I know it's uncomfortable. That's an understatement, my mother said dryly, but her expression softened when she looked at Daniel. Despite everything, she couldn't help seeing my father in his features, the same way I had. I want to talk about the newspaper story, I continued. About finding a way forward that exposes Dad's workplace misconduct without putting Daniel in the spotlight. Valerie straightened. I agree. Daniel shouldn't suffer more than he already has. My mother's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting I should continue protecting Richard after everything he's done? Not protecting him, I clarified. Protecting Daniel. And yourself. Dad's threatening to expose your past, Mom. He's desperate and cornered. Who knows what else he might do? The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. By its end, we had formulated a new strategy, one that would bring my father's professional misconduct to light while minimizing the exposure of his personal life. The next day, my mother called Emily Jacobs and the Philadelphia Inquirer reporter. Instead of giving a full interview about my father's double life, she would focus exclusively on the hospital's pattern of protecting my father despite multiple harassment complaints. The story would be about institutional failure rather than personal scandal. Meanwhile, I contacted my father with terms. If he withdrew his threat to expose my mother's confidentiality agreement violation, we would keep Valerie and Daniel out of the press. If he refused, we would move forward with the complete story, regardless of the consequences to all parties. His response was immediate. I'll agree to your terms, but I want to meet with you, Olivia. Just you. 2 days later, I sat across from my father in a private room at a restaurant outside the city. He looked diminished somehow, gray-faced and hollow-eyed, his confident surgeon's demeanor replaced by something approaching humility. Thank you for seeing me, he began. And for the arrangement regarding Valerie and Daniel. I didn't do it for you, I replied coldly. I did it for Daniel. He deserves some privacy while he processes all of this. My father nodded. He's a good kid. He's a lot like you, actually. When I didn't respond, he continued, Olivia, I know nothing I say can justify what I've done. But I want you to understand. Understand what? I interrupted. That you maintained 2 separate families for 15 years? That you pressured and harassed women who depended on you professionally? That you threatened Mom with exposure when she tried to hold you accountable? He flinched at each accusation. I've made terrible choices, he admitted. I've hurt people I love and people who trusted me. There's no excuse for that. He took a deep breath. The hospital board has asked for my resignation. Penn Medicine will issue a statement acknowledging the complaints against me and establishing new protocols for reporting harassment. It's over, Olivia. My career, my reputation, all of it. And that's supposed to make me feel better. I asked. No, he said simply. Nothing can undo what I've done. But I wanted you to hear from me that I accept the consequences of my actions. All of them. He reached for his wallet and removed a folded document, sliding it across the table. This is for you. It was a legal document transferring ownership of his vacation property in Cape May to me, the beach house where we had spent every summer of my childhood. I don't want your property, I said, pushing it back toward him. It's not about the property, he replied. It's about making sure you know that nothing, not Valerie, not Daniel, not my career, was ever more important to me than you. I failed as a husband, as a doctor, as a man of integrity. But loving you was the one thing I got right. Tears welled in my eyes, tears of anger and grief and loss. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I whispered. I know, he said, his own eyes glistening. I don't expect forgiveness, Olivia. But I hope someday we might find a way back to some kind of relationship. Even if it's nothing like what we had before. As our meeting ended, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The idolized father of my childhood was gone forever, replaced by this flawed, fallen man. But in acknowledging his failures without excuses, he had shown a glimmer of the integrity I had once believed defined him. The newspaper story broke the following week. As agreed, it focused exclusively on the institutional failures at Penn Medicine that had allowed a prominent surgeon to harass female subordinates for years without consequences. My father was named, as were the brave women who had come forward, including Emily Jacobs. The hospital issued a formal apology and announced a comprehensive review of their harassment policies. There was no mention of Valerie or Daniel. Thanksgiving arrived again, exactly 1 year after my mother's devastating toast had shattered our family's foundation. So much had changed in those 12 months that it sometimes felt like I was living someone else's life entirely. My mother had sold our family home and moved to a sleek downtown apartment, reinventing herself as a fiercely independent woman focused on her thriving design business. The divorce had been finalized in July, leaving her financially secure and emotionally lighter than I'd seen her in years. I never realized how much energy I spent maintaining the perfect family facade, she told me over coffee one morning. There's something liberating about living truthfully, even when the truth is painful. My father had moved to Chicago after all, accepting a position at a small community hospital where his surgical skills were valued despite his tarnished reputation. He called me every Sunday, brief conversations that were awkward but increasingly genuine as we navigated our new relationship, one based on who he actually was, not who I had believed him to be. As for me, my engagement to Jackson remained broken, though we had managed to establish a cordial professional relationship at the financial firm where we both worked. My leave of absence had stretched to 3 months as I'd grappled with rebuilding my identity in the wake of my family's implosion. When I returned to work, it was with a newfound perspective on what truly mattered. Most surprisingly, I had developed a genuine relationship with Daniel, meeting regularly for movies, museum visits, or just casual meals. At 15, he was navigating the complex aftermath of discovering his true parentage with remarkable resilience. Greg called me last week. He told me during our most recent outing. He wants to meet for lunch. Says he misses me. How do you feel about that? I asked. He shrugged. Weird. But good weird, I think. He raised me for 14 years. That has to count for something, right? I'd nodded, thinking of my own journey to forgiveness. It does count. People can make terrible mistakes and still have love in their hearts. Valerie and my mother had reached an unexpected détente as well. While they would never be friends, They had developed a respectful coexistence centered around their shared concern for Daniel's well-being. The last time I'd visited Valerie's home, I'd noticed my mother's distinctive design touches in her newly renovated kitchen, a small but significant olive branch between former adversaries. This Thanksgiving, I had decided to host dinner in my apartment, a neutral territory for our unconventional gathering. My mother arrived first, bringing her famous cranberry sauce and a tentative smile. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, surveying my modest dining setup. "It won't be like our old Thanksgivings." "That's the point," I replied, hugging her. "We're creating something new." Valerie and Daniel arrived next, bearing pumpkin pies and nervous energy. Daniel immediately gravitated to the television to check the football scores, while Valerie helped arrange flowers with an awkward formality that suggested she still couldn't quite believe she was welcome. The doorbell rang again, and I opened it to find my father standing uncertainly in the hallway, a bottle of wine in his hands. "You came," I said simply. "You invited me," he replied, the gratitude evident in his voice. As he entered, the room fell silent. My mother stiffened, her hand tightening around her glass. Daniel looked up from the television, his expression unreadable. Valerie took an unconscious step backward. "Richard," my mother acknowledged with a nod that was neither warm nor hostile, progress from the burning hatred of months past. "Eleanor," he responded with equal restraint. "You look well." The tension was palpable, but not explosive as it once would have been. This was the first time all five of us had been in the same room, these fractured pieces of what had once been two separate families, now forming something entirely new and undefined. As we gathered around my table, too small for the elaborate place settings of my childhood Thanksgivings, but perfect for this intimate gathering, I found myself reaching for the wine glass at my place. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, standing as all eyes turned to me. My mother flinched slightly, no doubt remembering her own toast a year ago. My father looked down at his plate. Valerie and Daniel exchanged a quick glance. "To truth," I said simply. "To finding our way through pain to something authentic. And to family, not the one we pretend to have, but the one we actually build, with all its imperfections and complications." 5 glasses rose tentatively in response. As we clinked them together, I saw something in each face around the table: relief, hope, acceptance. We were damaged, all of us, by the lies and betrayals that had brought us to this point. But we were also healing, finding our way towards something honest. Later, as we finished dessert, my father cleared his throat. "I have an announcement," he said, glancing nervously at Valerie, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been accepted into a fellowship program focusing on medical ethics and patient advocacy. It's a complete career change, but after everything that happened, it felt right." My mother raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I, however, felt a surprising surge of pride. "That's great, Dad," I said sincerely. Daniel piped up unexpectedly. "Does this mean you're staying in Chicago permanently?" My father looked at him, genuine emotion crossing his face. "Yes, but I'll still visit regularly, if that's what you want." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, I think it is." As the evening wound down, I found myself standing in my kitchen with my mother, washing dishes side by side as we had done so many times throughout my life. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "With all of this?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm not okay with what happened," I replied. "I never will be. But I'm okay with where we are now, finding a way forward with the truth, however messy it is." She squeezed my hand, water dripping onto the floor between us. "You're stronger than I ever was, Olivia. I learned from you," I told her. "Watching you stand up for yourself this past year has taught me more than all those years of seeing the perfect version you thought you had to present to the world." When everyone had left and I was alone in my apartment, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. My father's betrayal had shattered the foundation of my life, forcing me to question everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and truth. The pain had been excruciating, the losses significant. Yet from those broken pieces, something authentic had emerged. Relationships based on honesty rather than pretense, strength discovered through vulnerability, and a newfound appreciation for the messy reality of human connection. My phone chimed with a text message from Daniel, "Best Thanksgiving ever. Same time next year?" I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. We're family after all." And we were. Not the family I had grown up believing in, but something more complex and ultimately more real. A family forged through crisis, tempered by truth, and sustained by the conscious choice to build connections even after betrayal. As I placed the last of the leftovers in my refrigerator, I found myself raising an imaginary glass once more. To endings that become beginnings. To the courage to face painful truths. And to the unexpected discovery that sometimes, when everything falls apart, what reassembles in its place is stronger than what was lost. Hey everyone, I hope my story resonated with you in some way. Family secrets can devastate us, but they don't have to define us forever. I'd love to hear if you've ever experienced a family revelation that changed your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey of betrayal, truth, and eventual healing spoke to you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about navigating life's most challenging moments. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that there's hope after family betrayal. Thank you for being here with me through this difficult, but ultimately hopeful story. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most important family isn't the one we're born into, but the one we consciously choose to build.